Dr. Kamete. So that is the team from our side. Oh, and then I think that General Mapaha would be logging in from a separate spot. Yes.
Okay.
And then the audit committee chair, we have Mr. Mangu, that will be actually presenting more or less on the same item, but it will be two presentations between him and Mr. Mabilane.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Let me welcome the chairman of the audit committee, Luanda Mungugu. You are welcome, sir.
Thank you,
Chair. Thank you very much. All right, without much ado, let's then move to the first item. The presentation will be led by Ms. Mabilane on the internal, it's an internal audit, internal audit function, and then Luanda on the work of the external audit, the audit committee. So it's going to be one presentation after the other. Executive, do you want to preface briefly before I invite the team, the two colleagues?
Yes, Chair. Yes, Chair, thank you very much. Chair, as you know that on an annual basis, we get audited by the Auditor General, and that is looking at both our performance information as well as looking at the other issues that are around procurement and finances. So we normally, once that process has been finalized, depending on what the outcome from the audit report would be, then we would have, as a department, through the various chiefs of services and divisions, develop action plans. And then the responsibility of our internal audit, as well as that of the audit committee, is to then hold us accountable, for lack of a better word, as the department, to see whether the action plans that we have crafted, are we really delivering on them? So the two presentations we are going to get, one is from the internal audit, and also our internal auditor also accounts to the audit committee as to the number of audits they are going to conduct in a specific year. So, so she also reports to the audit committee, and the audit committee as well holds us accountable for that. But also maybe just to say, Chair, that on a monthly basis, we have the Accountability Management Committee, which I chair, that is attended by all chiefs of services and divisions. And the responsibility of that committee is to make sure that we hold also our chiefs of services and division accountable for the action plans that they have crafted. So these are the issues that will be reflected in the two presentations. And I suggest that we start with the one of our internal audit division. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Let's move. I now invite Ms. Mabilane to take us through.
Good morning, Chair of the Portfolio Committee and members, the Deputy Minister of Defense, and the Chairperson of the Audit Committee and other Audit Committee members, the DOD senior officials, and all members present. My name is Fikile Mabilane. I'm the Acting Chief Audit Executive as introduced by SecDev, and I will be taking you through the presentation on the progress regarding the monitoring of AGSA findings and related challenges. The vision, Chair of the division, is an exceptional, innovative driver of positive change, always pursuing of excellence. The mission is continuously support the DOD through the internal audit expertise and skills, proactively promote a resilient control environment. Our mandate is derived from the PFMA, Section 38, section 1A2. The accounting officer of a department, trading entity or constitutional institution must ensure that that department or trading entity or constitutional institution has and maintains a system of internal audit under the control and direction of the audit committee, complying with and operating in accordance with regulations and instructions prescribed in terms of section 76 and 77. That is why, Chair, we're having the chairperson of the audit committee, because functionally we report to him. Treasury Regulations 326 requires that internal audit must be conducted in terms of the standards set by the Institute of Internal Audits. We are reviewed on a yearly basis whether we are complying with those standards that are set by the Institute of Internal Audit. The Treasury Regulations 3.27 requires that internal audit must prepare in consultation with and for approval by the audit committee a rolling 3-year strategic internal audit plan based on its assessment of key areas of risk for the institution, having regard to its current operations, those proposed in the strategic plan, and its risk management strategy. We take a strategic risk from the department that they have compiled, and we prepare our plan according to that, so that we can ensure that for 3 years in a row, we cover all the risks that are highlighted as high for the department, and we audit and make sure that the department manages those risks. And there's an annual plan, internal audit plan, for each first year of the rolling 3-year strategic internal audit plan. So that is the one that Chair is approved by the audit committee, and they monitor us according to that. On a quarterly basis, we report to them so that we can give progress on whether we are achieving our plans or not. So, Chair, the next slide is talking to the monitoring of internal audit action plans. How do we monitor our own reports whether management is actually implementing the action plans that they have set themselves at that particular time? Internal audit action plans are monitored by doing follow-up audits, and the reports are presented to the audit committee on a quarterly basis. So what we do after we have prepared an audit, we have finalized it, the report is presented to that particular chief of the service or division, and then they give us their own action plans on how they are going to address those internal audit findings. So then from there, then it is monitored at the audit committee whether those action plans are being monitored. There's a finding tracker. It is a standing item in the audit committee. It lists all the findings that the internal audit issues to every service and division. So we will have, for instance, in the Army, 50 findings on fuel, and then we will go back and check if the action plans have been implemented. If they said 50 action plans are going to be implemented at this time, end of October or something like that, then we go back and check if they have implemented those action plans, and then we come back to the audit committee and indicate that the Army maybe has implemented only 30% or 40% of those audit action plans. So for the financial year under audit, we have 12 follow-up audits on the audit plan that we are going to do. It includes external audit as well as internal audit findings. So we are looking at all the high-level qualifications that AG has come up with. You will see as I progress, those are the findings that we will be following up. If I can continue to the next slide, monitoring of audit action plans. This one is including the AGSA findings. So the DOD action plans for the 21-22 audit still have to be submitted to the internal audit division for scrutiny. They are busy compiling the detailed management responses and the action plans, and then it will be forwarded to the internal audit division. Then we will start with our follow-up audit in November, and we are anticipating that by mid-February we are going to have finished the audit, and then a report will be ready end of February to be tabled to the audit committee. Obviously, Chair, we would have discussed the findings with management before it is tabled to the audit committee. The AGSA qualifications, as they have been outlined by the Auditor General previously. The first one is goods and services and investment. This talks to the sensitive environment that the Auditor General is unable to get access to some of the transactions and satisfy themselves that all of them were necessary. So as internal audit, there is not much we can do because of the area, the nature of that sensitive environment. However, we had discussions with the AG, with the IGDOD, and we have agreed that as according to the Defense Act, they have a mandate to audit the sensitive environment and all the projects that are in that environment. So IG is going to be the one in future auditing the environment, the sensitive environment. And there are discussions taking place between them and AG as to how are they going to rely on their reports or the work that is going to be done by the IGDOD. The next item is irregular expenditure. The department did not fully record irregular expenditure in the notes to the financial statement as required by section 43B1 of the PFMA. This is a repeat audit qualification from the previous 3 years. Chair, you will remember that if you have disclosed your irregular expenditure properly in the financial statement, they are not going to, it's not going to be qualified by the Auditor General. They can mention it, but they will not issue a qualification if it's properly disclosed. Unfortunately, in our case, it is not complete because AG will go to a particular unit, they draw certain files from the floor, and then they audit those files. They discover that they are irregular transactions, but when they go back to the register, they find that it's not recorded on the register, irregular expenditure register of that particular unit. So this is where the finding is coming from, where AG is saying our irregular expenditure, the registers are incomplete. So internal audit was requested by the CFO to assist the department in ensuring that irregular expenditure is fully disclosed by doing a full audit 100% at all the procurement centers of the department to ensure that all unrecorded irregular expenditure is recorded on the register. So the audit is still in progress. It has started last year towards the end of the year, and we are almost done with it. We are anticipating that a final report is going to be ready by end of November. So, Chair, we have done a lot of presentations to management, different services and divisions after our audit of irregular expenditure. We have met with, they invited us to their forums, Command Council, work sessions. We have presented in the services with clear recommendations of what needed to be done for them to be able to implement all the action plans or to fix the issues that are taking place at the procurement centers. So we are receiving positive feedback. However, we will have to go back and check if they have implemented the action plans that they have promised to implement. So myself, I also presented in a procurement seminar. I was invited there in August to present at the procurement seminar where all the procurement officers were sitting together with the OCs. So I have presented to them all the findings, the issues that are taking place in different units, and also the actions that they should take or the recommendations coming from internal audit. I've also indicated that as we are limited in the internal audit, we could only cover 11 units out of 73. We couldn't go to all the procurement centers because we are very few. So I have indicated that there are things that all of them should cover or should make sure that they are in place, because most of the findings were the same in most of the units. You'll find most units don't have irregular expenditure registers, or people are not properly trained to do their work. Somebody is doing more than one work. There's not the segregation of duties. So there's a number of findings that are cutting across the different units. So they have been advised, because we've given them our recommendations, to say, even if we did not audit that particular unit, they must still make sure that certain things are in place so that when Auditor General comes, they will not be found wanting. We are still finalizing the last unit, procurement center, which is CPSC, is the biggest. It took us a long time to complete the files there. So we are busy, we are waiting for management responses, and then we are going to be able to get a final report like I estimated in November, and we will have the final irregular expenditure figures of all the work that we have done in the 11 units. Now I'm going to talk to the movable tangible capital assets. AG was saying I was unable to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence for movable assets, as the department could not indicate where the assets are located or provide other information in support of this asset. This is also a repeat finding, Chair, from the previous year. I didn't put everything that the AG recorded, but I just highlighted the first part of the audit qualification. So a follow-up was done by internal audit, mostly in the Army environment, because that's where most of these findings were coming from, and the action plans that were presented to the audit committee. We have reviewed those action plans, we followed up, and this area remains a challenge, Chair, as it is an audit qualification even again this financial year. The issue is that you will find that the Army or any other unit or any other service, when they get a qualification from AG, they put action plans specifically addressing that particular environment. Maybe it's a unit in Bloemfontein, they will just focus on that. If office 102 has been recorded as the assets are missing, or they don't know where the assets are, they will go and fix that particular office or that particular unit instead of covering the whole population of the DOD. So the Auditor General will go back. When they go back, they will not take a sample again in the same unit. So they will go to another unit, and they will find that same issues are still applicable. That is why we're still sitting with this qualification. We can move on to the next one. This one, Chair, is it's employee benefits. Its employee benefits, the department did not establish adequate internal controls to monitor leave processing. As a result, not all leave transactions were captured, which resulted in the leave balance and the provision being overstated. This is coming from the time of COVID, where most leave requests were not captured on the system. So AG is raising a concern that the employee benefits are overstated. If the leave is not captured, an employee retires or they resign, then the leave is going to be overstated. They will be paid more benefits than they actually supposed to. So this is a previous audit finding that is coming from the previous year, and internal audit has done a follow-up fully in this area of HR. And HR has also requested us to do an audit in the high-risk areas that they are encountering. This is HR corporate that is dealing with the GRC of the HR. So they requested us to assist them in ensuring that there are internal controls in place in the area of the Army and also military health services. Those audits have started, Chair. I will just report that we are going to complete them before the end of the financial year, and we will be able to highlight if there are still challenges in this area, or if there are internal control challenges, and then they will be reported to management and also to the audit committee.
Have I lost her?
Yep, I've also lost her, Chair.
Oh, I see. Okay. The problem is on their side. They've just been not shedded. They're trying to reconnect. So if we could just bear with them. Deputy Minister, I did not see you. Good morning and my apologies.
Honorable Chair and honorable members, good morning. My apology, we do have connectivity issues on my side. I had to end up using my phone, but I think now we will survive the remaining part of our meeting. Thank you.
Okay, no. Okay, no, it's fine. Thank you so much, DM.
You muted, Chair.
Thanks. Mangugu, yeah, I hope you are not also affected by the same problem or challenge.
No, Chair, I'm okay on my side. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks. Okay, colleagues, the team from the head office, it's reconnecting. If you could just be patient for some minute or two. Looks as though they're taking long to reconnect. They were dealing with challenges. I'm sure we can skip this and come back. Let me check if they... Or SecDef is back. See, but it's not, or there is now. She's fully, no, I don't see her now. Yes, SecDef. Yes. Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you very much, SecDef. She was on challenges. Over to Ms. Mapilan.
Thank you, Chair. My next slide is challenges. EAD is the Internal Audit Division, not covering the necessary audit risk universe as required by Treasury regulations and standards due to capacity constraints, and this results in an audit finding by AGSA. AGSA has been raising this finding that there are capacity constraints in the Internal Audit Division because we are unable to cover the whole department in terms of our audit. So we've been prioritizing only on the high-risk areas. We are unable to cover the whole department. There are delays in getting management and responses, which delays the finalization of the audit. So after we've done our audit, in some areas, we get delays in terms of management responses. They take more than what we would have liked them to take, and that delays our audits. There are delays also in the implementation of audit action plans in most areas. The dates that they have set themselves, they don't meet those deadlines, and sometimes there are non-implementations of audit action plans. So when we go back to the units and we audit a certain area, we would find that they have not implemented the action plans, and the audit findings are repeating. Hence, we are having some that have been there for quite a number of years. challenges as they continue. The DOD is not having an integrated systems, which create a lot of work for auditors to go around the units and do manual audit. This is a heavy assignment for internal auditors to work manually. We have to vouch each and every document, we go through files and files. That is what creates a lot of work and delays in finalization of the audit within even the limited capacity that we are having. If the department was electronized like other department systems are integrated, interfaced and all of that, the audit work would be very, very minimal. It would be very easy. The current staffing would be fine if everything was electronized in the department. Unfortunately, at this point, everything is manual, which makes it very difficult for auditors to do their work. There are some critical vacancies that remain unstaffed. So, Chair, that will be the end of my story. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mapilani. Let me invite Luyanda, Mr. Mangugu, the Chartered Accountant, is the Chair of the Audit Committee. Over to you, sir.
Very good morning to you, Chair. Thank you for the warm welcome. Also, good morning to the members of the Portfolio Committee. A very good morning to Deputy Minister. Good morning to also SecDef and the rest of the executive team from the department. All protocol observed. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to try and see if I can, just 1 second. I'm going to try and see if I can go through this presentation, but I'm just trying to do my settings properly, Chair, if you allow me very quickly. Sorry, sir. Am I audible, Chair?
Yes, yes, you are, sir.
Thank you, sir. Let me just try this. All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I may not be visible. I will adjust my camera quickly, but let me proceed so long.
Okay.
Right. That's probably better on. Chair, thank you for the opportunity once again. I'm going to go through very quickly through some slides so that I can be able to take the committee quickly without delay. My name is Luyanda Mangugu. I chair the DOD Audit Committee, and it is a pleasure and an honor. And we are 3 members there, and this is a presentation I'll be presenting to the committee to update on the progress on the implementation of the action plan, and also share some challenges that we've discussed with management. These are the items, Chair, I'll be going through in terms of my presentation. I'll do an intro, then I'll go through some just brief summary on the qualification areas, and then I'll touch basically on all those matters until I conclude. Just moving quickly to the introduction. So let me just get rid of the sorry, Chair, about that. Just in terms of the introduction, Chair, we are a statutory committee. I think that's important maybe to highlight because the PFMA demands that departments have audit committees. So per section 77 and also per regulations, that's where we are cited as a requirement and a necessity. And our work in the main revolves around providing oversight and providing an assurance, an advisory capacity is one would also mention over the governance processes in the department, risk management, and even the control processes in the department. And this we do by having quarterly meetings. So ordinarily in a year, would have at least 4 quarterly meetings, but we do have special ones when we have the AG process as well. But if I go through also what's referred to our charter, our terms of reference, we are empowered, Chair, to provide oversight over the effectiveness of the internal control systems in the department. And also, as the previous presentation mentioned, we also are charged with ensuring that we provide functional oversight over the internal audit function. We also look within the department over the risk management system, or the risk management unit would also give input into the audit committee Also would look at any concerns that are raised by the internal and external auditors, that is AG. And also we do look at the investigations, which is in this case DACAF, that they do to provide follow-up and monitoring to make sure that they follow through to implementing all the recommendations that they would have raised. Just briefly, I'm not going to go through this in detail because the previous presentation touched on it, but I thought let me just share a slide just to sum up the qualification areas that were raised by the Auditor General for the 21-22 financial year. As mentioned, they raised the issue of not being able to get full access to the special defense activities. So they always, I've seen for a couple of years, they've been giving us a qualification on this particular matter, but there are plans I'll share further down the slides as to what interventions we're doing as Audit Committee to try and mitigate or open up and have some sharing of information in this space. But that remains a concern from the AG. Also, the issue of irregular expenditure. That's why our internal auditors, since last year, in fact, they've been assisting to try and get to the bottom of the full disclosure of the irregular expenditure, and that project remains underway. Movable tangible capital assets, basically the assets of the department, as we know, they are all across the country, and the issue of keeping accurate asset registers has been an issue. And this has been raised, and I think it's an area just because of the massive scale, and I think also it touches on the systems not being available necessarily to capture this. This continues to be a challenge in the department. Also, the issue of employee benefits, I think on leave. I was just thinking, in fact, as I was going through this presentation, the issue of employee benefits, talking around leave management. And you can imagine if they're working in a very manualized environment, just capturing leave applications in a month, they may run into thousands. So I think the urgency in terms of what I'll speak to later, intervening on the ICT infrastructure refresh, it becomes quite critical to assist in just making sure that this particular finding is addressed. Also, the touch on COE, this particular finding is newish in the space, and this talked in the main to AG not being able to get sufficient evidence to satisfy themselves about the salaries that were paid to the reserve force staff. And it's quite a significant amount. You'll see that's why it made itself into the qualification area as well. On the emphasis of matter side, they touched on litigation, and it's a huge sum as well that the department has to defend itself. And if this were to be lost by the department, you can see the exposure going to the tune of 7.5 billion rands. And of course, there's measures to try and defend this amount, but no one knows the outcome, and hence it is being emphasized. Also, the issue of paying suppliers within 30 days, it has been flagged by the AG. These are just a heads up on what AG raised, and I'm sure the committee through each is very much aware of these areas. So if I touch just on how the Audit Committee provides oversight over the Audit Action Plan, what we do immediately, end of July, that's mostly the time that AG issues their audit report, which is normally accompanied by a very detailed management report, which has all the findings and management comments. Immediately that is tabled before us prior to the issuance of that audit report. The Audit Committee at that very meeting, in fact, passes a resolution almost without fail that management needs to prepare and put together an audit action plan. And this is in response to every single finding raised. So there's timelines, there's responsible persons, and it puts us in a position where by quarter 1, we are able then to expect an audit action plan that we can start following up on to start making monitoring over the department as to whether they actually have started addressing the findings. What we do on a quarterly basis as a standing agenda item in all our quarterly meetings, we would also have this matter featured in our agenda. We would monitor progress on each finding. And I think the focus on our side is mainly to ensure that management does address the root causes of each finding so that we get to the bottom of it. And that also we don't look at a finding only at a specific, let me say, sample that was selected by the AG. But instead, we'll make sure that management looks at the entire control environment so that this is actually addressed. For example, in this case, in whichever asset base, if it's in whichever army base, if that's where the finding was pointing to, so that we don't only look at addressing that particular army base, but we look at all the army bases if it's a finding in that respect. So we look very closely to make sure that the control environment is being improved and that the root causes are actually the ones that are being addressed as well. And of course, alongside, we'd make sure that the last point there, that internal audit does some verification. So if management says we've actually addressed 10% of the action plan, that internal audit can also confirm whether there's evidence that those findings that are reported as having been resolved, have they really been resolved? And this is part of what we do on a quarterly basis. But now if I take the 21-22 audit report and I look at the findings that were raised and I look at the action plan, which in the last meeting which we had, which was our Q1 meeting for this year, which we had on the 2nd of September, I'm going to share some couple of slides to basically respond to the question posed to us by the committee to give progress update on the audit action plan. And maybe before I go through these few slides, maybe just one step back to say that when we came here in June of this year, we tabled and we painted a picture of what was at that point in time. But between then and now, AG has come and they've done an audit. And ordinarily, when they do their annual audit, they do a status of records review, which basically takes the previous year's findings primarily and does almost a follow-up to make sure that they have a sense of the status of implementation of each and every finding that they had raised in the previous year. So what I'm going to go through is essentially an updated or a revised version of what we looked at in June, and every single finding which would not have been addressed by the department, ordinarily AG pulls it into the new report, and it will become a repeat finding. So this is a revised version, taking into account whether any item was addressed or not. And you'll see that in the main, there's a large number of areas where we see repeats as internal audit has gone through the presentation. And to sum up what these presentation slides I'm going to go through is that when we met on the 2nd of September, for each of the different services and divisions and units within the department, there were certain findings that were raised. And you see on that first slide, HR is quite prominent, and logistics also is quite prominent. And what you see on the last two columns on the right-hand side is basically where the action plans per finding have been identified and the progress to the implementation of those action plans. And you'll see all the zeros there, which means as at that time, the department had only gone as far as splitting the findings into the different services and divisions and to the different units. And they had not at that stage come up with action plans as to how they will confront and address each of these findings, the root causes, and they also therefore were not able to give us any progress update at that stage. And this is basically the picture right across all the, I think there's about 240, you'll see the final slide, I think about 243 findings. And this is what, therefore, Chair, I'm putting forward to say that the department is still going through that process. And I'm hoping, since that was early September, that by now there should be some traction, that they've actually done some work. And the pressure is on because, as I said, the resolution by the Audit Committee is as early as end of July. So August has come and gone, and now now at that time we're in September, but now we're in the latter parts of October. So by now, when we meet for Q2, we're expecting that these columns will be fully populated, and in fact that there should be progress in how far management has gone to address the root causes, because very soon AG will be on our doorsteps again to start their process, and we would like to really break the back of the qualification, and it only can happen if we respond on time to these issues. I'm going to go through this so the committee can just look at some of the areas that had findings that were raised. In here, you can see again at the bottom, the Information Systems Division, about 21 findings were raised. Again, HR, as far as contingent liability, revenue and receivables are concerned. Logistics is coming up there prominently as well. On the next one, again, logistics comes in as far as procurement of which expenditure items are concerned. also DI, that's which are at the bottom. Also, if I go through the next one, basically this is just to share that these are the findings, and there's absolutely nothing at that stage that was done. And we continue encouraging the department to act with speed. I think that's the secret behind this, because as findings get raised, by the time even July ends, everyone is aware of which finding has been raised in their area. We encourage the department to start acting even before the report is issued. By the time that they issue, there's already some traction, and come Q1, we should be seeing some progress. So I think going forward, one of the areas we will impress heavily on management to say, let's act with speed in responding to the age issues. And just in reflecting to what we put forward in June, I think at that stage we had 229 findings, give or take. And now you can see the total raised by age in 21-22 has gone up to 243, which means a lot of those findings have either repeated themselves and there's been maybe additional areas of concern that the age has raised. But the message that we're receiving from this is that the environment has not improved, and we have to put additional new interventions to make sure the department is turned around. If I share now, Chair, with the committee, the challenges that I would like to bring forward, maybe let me start with the internal audit activity as to what are the challenges within that space, then I'll go into the service and divisions, the core business. The main thing I'd like maybe to highlight is that the CAE, the Chief Audit Executive position, remains vacant in the department. We had done, I was actually invited to sit in the interview process myself. This was almost a year ago now, over 12 months, and still that position remains vacant. Ms. Mabilane is still acting in that position, and we are concerned with these delays. And there's reasons that I think Secretary has shared with me as well, but the bottom line is we still don't have firm leadership in the internal division. And of course, this fluidity in that space does pose challenges, because we need the CE to be in place so that even the areas of capacitating and bringing in the necessary resources is firmed up and someone can be held fully accountable, because that's what they charge to do. With an acting person, it can have its own challenges. So we continue encouraging that the process be concluded. Also, the internal division itself, we would like to see it being capacitated with specialist skills, especially in the area of finance and ICT. And you'll see information systems or the ICT environment in this space has become quite critical, and it's important, in fact, if we're going to turn around the department. So as we do that, the refresh of the ICT infrastructure, we need to capacitate our auditors so they're able to give us the assurance, and hence this area is an area of development. We'd like to see additional resources, not just warm bodies, but some with special skills in these specific areas. Also, when it comes to, I think some good news story maybe that I can share with the committee is that when we started, there was internal division where Ms. Mabilane sits. That's basically the core of internal audit in the department. But there's another internal audit in the department which sits within IG. And it was always difficult for some reason for them to work together, but we've been able to bring these two teams together so that there is an increased coverage if you look at both of them. In fact, the internal division within IG is able, because they are uniform members, so they're able to look at what ordinarily Ms. Mamilane's area would not have been allowed to look at. And it talks to what that number one qualification area by AGSA is as well, where they talk of a special defense account and them not being able to see fully the operation and the spending and being able to report on that. So IG is working very hard, and they now are able to put together their plan, just like internal division, and they're reporting to the audit committee, and we're able to monitor and make sure that their issues are raised and also they're being followed up on. So we're very happy that we have a much more wider coverage through these two audit units within the department. Also, maybe a concern that I can raise is the issue that every 5 years, our internal division is subjected to external quality assurance review. That report remains pending. It's been in the play for about 6 to 9 months. And so we would like to see that being concluded, because it is an opportunity for us to see what improvements we can introduce within our internal audit division to make sure that we are better at delivering on the mandate as internal audit in the department. Also, the findings tracker, I'd like to report that besides the audit action plan, which is basically the outcome of the AG process, internal audit, of course, also has findings. And as they raise them, we have recommended that they actually start keeping a findings tracker. And this does not only touch on the current year findings, but we've asked them to go back even 2 to 3 years. So they're busy compiling the 21-22 findings tracker and even the 2021 findings tracker. This is to assist us to have a full view as to whether management is indeed taking audit findings raised by internal audit seriously. And this findings tracker is still under development, and we're expecting when we sit again for Q2 to have a much clearer picture, because they're working backwards from 22-23, and we'll start seeing 21-22, and later on we'll see 2021 as well. And this will be monitored side by side, internal audit findings, but also AG findings, because if management does not take seriously internal audit findings, it's clear that they will not take seriously AG findings. So it's a build-up to make sure that we improve the control environment before externally we're audited by the AG. The next slide is also continuing to focus on the services and divisions. And this is an important one I'd like the committee to look at, that when we looked at the risk profile of the department through the months, covering over a 12-month period, in fact, now, we've seen that the risk profile of the department remains high. So in other words, you just see red in terms of the coloring of the risk profile of the department, which means there's high exposure items that are being unmitigated from quarter to quarter. And if we look at these in terms of analysis, what it boils down to is that unless there's sufficient funding made available to the department, it is going to be almost very, very difficult, close to impossible, to mitigate on a large scale some of the core risks that the department is facing. And this goes right across. And in fact, most of these risks that the department has identified, they talk to the core mandate of the department. And by us or by the funding not being made available, what it does, it threatens the ability of the department to deliver on its core mandate, and consequently, it puts the nation at risk in terms of our national security, and sovereign risk becomes highlighted. So this is something that is quite important. You'll see as we talk about ICT that the infrastructure is old, going back decades, and it really hampers a lot, not just internal audit, but even corporations. They're like the leave issue. If leave to members that go over 100,000, I mean, actually around about 70,000, give or take, 70,000 members. You can just imagine again, if the manual recordal of leave is the system that they use, that this becomes an area of criticality. But the ICT is pervasive in terms of its support requirement to execute the department's mandate, and would like really to see that risk profile being neutralized so that the mitigation plans are put into place, but funding becomes quite important. So we are highlighting this, but the committee, I'm sure, is aware that there is a huge chunk of our regular expenditure currently, which actually points to excess spending on COE. Basically, the department cannot afford to pay its salaries. It has to take from other areas to compensate for COE. Hence, there's irregular expenditure there. So this actually just points again to the issue of funding. It is a big challenge. Also, what we've seen is that since internal audit started, in fact, to assist the department in looking through the procurement centers, as they've reported, they've looked, concluded about 11 to date, and they're still concluding their work. What we've analyzed and seen in that space is that the procurement units within the department, roughly about 73, give or take, they become breeding ground for irregular expenditure from the reports that we're getting. And this, some of the reasons that make these procurement units to really be breeding ground for irregular expenditure is because the uniform members in those procurement units, a lot of them have not been through the SM training. They sometimes don't even have the equipment. This is even talking to printers at some stages. They don't have sufficient number of staff members to be able to have proper segregation of duties. And some of them have not declared their financial interests, so they end up doing business with the department, and of course that's not allowed. And sometimes the splitting of orders, because there are certain thresholds where you must go out on tender. So if you split it, it could be seen as avoiding going through a regular SCM process. And these things happen in some of these instances, in some of these units. Also, there's a failure to secure, in some cases, the minimum number of codes, and sometimes bids are awarded to suppliers who have expired tax clearance certificates. And the list goes on. So what we've seen is that if the department can be able to manage and clean up and capacitate our procurement units in terms of them being able to do and stick to regulations as far as SCM, a lot of our regular expenditure would actually be cleaned out. But at this stage, until that is sorted, we will unfortunately continue to churn out or produce irregular expenditure. And this is an area of concern. And already you've seen in the previous presentation, Internal Audit has unearthed almost just north of 400 million worth of irregular expenditure, which was not identified before, but now it's come to the fore, and that's why the assessment process continues there. Also, the policy board, I think in the main, what has been given as a reason to this, not convening since 2020 was a COVID issue, but that is now behind us. So we're just citing that it is a concern to us that the policy board had not convened, because there's a number of policies which remain behind schedule in terms of revision and updating, and therefore it could result in non-compliance. And we urge that the policy board reconvenes so that the policy backlog can be cleared. If we go to the fraud and corruption cases, this is an opening balance as in April 2022, the beginning of the current year, 22-23. We started with 407 cases. And thirdly, our caseload has increased slightly. It's now sitting at 510. Of course, some have been finalized, but there's more that have come in than those that have been concluded. Hence, we're seeing this slight increase in the number of cases. And of course, to us, this is an indicator of that brings concern, because rather than having escalating number of cases of potential fraud and corruption, we'd like to see that the message is going out that this will not be tolerated, that there'll be consequence management. So if it continues to increase, it either means there's slowness in clearing through investigations, or there's more of these cases that continue to happen. And that's the concern that we have. And if I go into just some highlights on these fraud cases, I've already said that there's a slight increase, about 9% increase since the beginning of the year. But our reading of the environment that DACAF has reported to us is that investigations continue to take longer than one would like to see. Some of them take, on average, between 2 to 5 years. And in fact, there may be some that take even longer. We've seen cases that sometimes take as long as up to a decade long, sometimes up to 10 years. But on average, they're sitting somewhere between 2 to 5 years. And the reason why I'm giving that band 2 to 5 is because you'll see on the next slide, I'm saying there is a room to improve the detail that's being shared with us in terms of how long each case has taken, when was it reported, when did the investigation start, when did we conclude it, and where is the report lying. So those details will continue to seek so that we can be able to establish exactly the aging of each of these cases. But as far as them taking long, that is certainly a concern that we can put forward. Also, in terms of some of the concluded investigations, what we've seen is that the fines that are being dished out by the various, whether it's Board of Inquiries or the various structures, is that they hand what we can call a slap in the wrist kind of sanctions. For example, a fine of 1,500 for what is fraud, in this case, was related to leave. So there was fraud linked to leave, and the fine was 1,500. And this doesn't really bode well for the departments or entire and our policy, where we say zero tolerance to fraud. So it's not sending the right message. And we continue to engage the department to say we do need to see some teeth in terms of how we engage and respond to fraud. And that's why there's talks going on to see how we can improve the situation. So the zero tolerance to fraud is what we advocate for. It's what the policy of the department stands for. And therefore, we want to see a stronger stance against any instance of fraud that's gone through investigation and there's been a perpetrator identified. Also, what we'd like to see, or maybe the challenge, Chair, is that there are some reports which have actually gone through investigation, and the report from DACAF is that these have been given to SecDef's office or the chief of SANDF, and for some reason they are waiting there, and some of these reports are sitting with services and divisions, and we are uncomfortable about the length of time these reports remain sitting because it delays the consequence management that we'd like to see. And as a result, we see AG coming up and saying the department is not exercising effective consequence management. So we are concerned, and we've raised this issue that we do need to see expediency and efficiency in just the conclusion of investigations themselves. But once they've been concluded, we do need to see efficiency in the conclusion and the implementation of the recommendations. And this is an area that we continue to engage and we'll be monitoring as well. As I mentioned earlier, the details in the reports that come from DACAF, we are monitoring. When we started much earlier, in fact, in the department, they gave us this detailed report, and over the months, it's been summarized, and we're looking back to unwind to that detailed one. And this is where we'll be able to see exactly, to trace each and every case as to when it started and where exactly is it. And at this stage, therefore, we're unable to give back the committee full account as to whether each and every recommendation that came out of their investigations, has it been implemented? And that's what we are pressing hard to make sure that on a quarterly basis, you should be able to tell us for each recommendation the state of implementation. And this is being addressed, and we'll continue looking for information in that regard. When it comes to ICT, some of the challenges or concerns that we've raised is the issue of the ICT digital transformation strategy of the department, which remains in draft. And it's been a while, in fact, that it's been in draft. And we are concerned that with the aged infrastructure that the department has been reporting to us, it's taking way too long to see the strategy being implemented. It may, in fact, be a funding issue because until there's funding that's been earmarked, it may be difficult to approve the strategy because you must then implement it. So it points again to the issue of the funding. But what we're citing here is that the department seriously and urgently needs to approve its ICT strategy so that there's a complete refresh. And this touches, in fact, from their financial management systems to how they deal with procurement, to HR systems, and the whole overhaul. It is a matter that needs to be looked with urgency. So this strategy, we're still waiting, and we'll continue monitoring and pleading for this to be approved as a matter of urgency. Also, we are concerned that the business continuity plans of the department, including its ICT continuity plans, which is the disaster recovery plans, they are not fully complete. In other words, there's no 100% complete plans that have been tested and are ready for any eventuality. They are reported to be 90% complete. And the fear in the ICT space is that 10% gap may just be the weak spot that brings the department on its knees. So even though it's reported as high, but we encourage that let's do the full mile to make sure that we are able to withstand whatever that may come up. And of course, with the aged infrastructure, the issue of ICT security and therefore disaster recoveries that must be fully on guard becomes much more important. And hence the ICT space is quite important to us. As far as ICT environment, it's contributing quite a bit, in fact, to our regular expenditure. It's sitting at about 10-12 that comes just from the ICT space. This is material in our scale, and therefore we are looking at that to make sure that we clamp down on any SM breaches so that we can make sure that there's full delivery on what's happening in the ICT environment. But of course, the condonation of those irregulars within the ICT space are still in the pipeline. There's been communication with the National Treasury, and we await also update on the consequence management in that regard. I thought also I'll just include that the legal services division within DOD has not made an appearance to the Audit Committee since December last year. I think they wanted clarity, in fact, on what's expected of them by the Audit Committee. We engaged, we said this was early, I think in March this year, but since then we still have not seen them making an appearance. So I thought I would bring it up because it is one of the emphasis of matter areas by the AG, and we do need them to make an appearance to account on how they are addressing and defending the department in terms of all the litigation matters that the department faces. And as I said, the overall exposure by the department is roughly at about 7.5 billion. So we're not comfortable if they don't appear to tell us what measures are being put forward to make sure that we address even the root causes of those matters that have turned litigious, but also to make sure that we are on point in defending the department. And we continue sending the invitations, and we continue pressing to make sure that, and I'm hoping by Q2, they should be there to make an appearance in the account. In conclusion, Chair, I'm almost done. It's just an encouragement, and I think, and highlight to say the department, in order for us to turn the tide and change the picture of what we've seen in the department, there's an urgency for speed in how we respond to all findings, both from internal audit and from the AG, especially because this is really the final test of whether the governance in the department is clean or not. So we do need to put traction and make sure that we respond urgently. As I said earlier, we're not comfortable if in September we had not made a move in terms of how far in populating the action plans, but hopefully something has been done to date, but we need speed going forward in this space. Also, in terms of the fraud and corruption processes from an investigation perspective, a new approach we submit, Chair, is perhaps necessary. Right now, you'll hear mentioning of board of inquiries, for example, where there's irregular expenditure happening within services and divisions. And as we've reported before, these board of inquiries are actually made up of the same members within the uniform space or within the same environment that actually incurred the irregular expenditure. So in other words, we're asking them to investigate their own colleagues, and this becomes a bit of a challenge. And possibly this could be the contributor to why we're seeing protracted investigation processes and perhaps a slap in the wrist when it comes to the sanctioning. And would like a review, a relook into this to make sure that there's independence in the conduct of investigations, there's efficiency, the expediency, and that we do see consequence management in the department, and to change the culture so that everyone is well aware that fraud we will not tolerate or corruption. The issue, Chair, we've spoken about, it's also in June, but I thought let me highlight it again because it continues being a factor. And I'm talking reality on the ground now. The issue of dual authority in the department, which really emanates from the PFMA, according to Section 38, placing the accounting authority as the center authority of the department. We all know that. But there is the Defense Act, which places the chief over the uniform members as basically the chief, everyone knows. And when it comes to dishing out consequence management, the accounting officer in this environment is unable to discipline the uniform members. That is delegated to the chief. And therefore, if the chief is not the one who must account if there's slack in consequence management, it makes it very difficult for SecDef to do anything about it. And we continue engaging and encouraging SecDef to make sure that she complies, for example, with the recommendations. But we've heard feedback that in some cases, she feels like there's nothing further she can do. And we would like this to be looked at because on paper, we all understand how PFMA is much more of a precedence, but in reality, the chief reports to the president. And therefore, if SecDef has issues that she must do, she can't pierce, as we speak, the veil and be able to discipline uniform members. And there's a lot of reliance placed on the chief there. And we'd like this to be looked at and considered so that, again, you'll see AG has already said to the department, they may at any stage actually issue a certificate of debt because the department is seen as not acting decisively in terms of consequences for fraud and investigations and issues that have been concluded. And we may be the first one in the country, in fact, to be issued with a certificate of debt. And we can't afford these to be the case. So therefore, we're pleading to say, if indeed there's this contestation, it may be something that needs to be looked at for this particular department. Also, the last one, Chair, I'd like to speak to is that, I mean, there's full commitment from the Audit Committee, and I think this is what the department as well would like to see, that we break the stagnation track record of getting a qualified audit report. We've had it now for 3 years in a row, and our target is that this department, for its strategic importance, belongs in the clean audit space. And for us to do that, we really need to pull together and seek commitment and cooperation from all stakeholders, including our services and divisions, so that there is training when needs be, especially referring to the area of procurement or SCM. But if that fails, of course, consequence management must be seen to be done and right across. And I'll leave my presentation to the Chair, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the presentation. I'm not going to make my comment now until after the comments by the colleagues. Colleagues as usual, all the better. It will save us some time to deal with other issues. Please, if I come down on you, don't fight me. Thanks. Over to Mr. Mare and then Dr. Pasok.
Chair, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Also, to both the presentations, it was much needed that we hear again what we have heard this morning, and it was not only just emphasizing what we basically already know and what we have identified as huge concerns for us as a committee, but it put one in a position to say, so what? What now? My concern is that both these presentations highlighted, first of all, the PFMA and the importance of the PFMA and compliance with the PFMA. Secondly, both of them only basically do reviews, do observations, do reports. No authority to enforce anything. And I think this correlates with what we have discussed the other day with the Auditor General, where I think you as Chair asked the question, so why don't you issue a certificate of debt? Because many of these things are repeated year after year, year after year, and there's absolutely no consequences. There's no consequences on any of the people that is regular transgressors. There's no consequence on any of the uniform leadership. There's no consequence on the accounting officer. There's no consequences on even the minister or the deputy minister as the political executive oversight over this. So my question is, what must we do? And I know that eventually they will say the buck stops with us and with Parliament. So what must we do? Because this cannot go on like this. And I've said it many times in the past. We want National Treasury to have confidence in the department and give us more money. If you read this, do we really expect from National Treasuries to say, you know, we will take your word for it, here's more money? Unlikely. We will see later today, but it's unlikely that they will give us money because there's no proper financial management, there's no proper accounting, and then there's no consequence for any transgressions. I found it very frustrating, Chairperson, and obviously we as a committee will have to decide now what is the next step. And one of my challenges that I've got is maybe we must get an opinion from the from the parliamentary law legal advisors and say, what can we do? We can report it to Parliament, and then what? Nothing happens. So next year, the Auditor General comes and he finds is reporting the same findings, and somehow we must try to enforce the Auditor General to say, you must do something. Because my question to both these presentations and these committees is, so how can you help us? By reporting it, yes, but how can you help us to force corrective actions, remedial actions? Because these are repeated, and I don't even want to go into the specifics of the two presentations, because for me that's the bottom line. So Chairperson, I don't know how they can report to us and make recommendations in terms of what we can do, but that is what I want to put basically for the committee. Because, you know, we know the answers that they're going to give us. We know the frustrations, and we also know the answer that the SecDef is going to give us. So how do we take this forward? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure the DM was taking notes. Over to you, Dr. Basobu.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, and everybody on the platform. Report is not far from what Honorable Murray is saying. To be specific in terms of the report, especially the first one, it is reported to us that the unit doesn't get joy, you know, in getting a response from the management of the department. To a certain extent, even the recommendations of the Audit General of the AG's office or the action plan is not implemented. In essence, which tells you, Chair, that the very people who have established this unit to assist them, all of a sudden, they don't want to be assisted. In essence, that's what this report is saying to us. But can we be told what are the reasons put forward? But again, Chair, for me, I don't think we don't know what to do. For me, the rules are clear. Immediately we get the response. As this committee, in my view, we are expected to make recommendations and on the basis of the report, as well as the response of the department, why they are not cooperating with this unit, which was established for them to assist them. Then obviously, in terms of the recommendations that we are going to make, we have to make follow-up to ensure that they are being implemented. In my view, we can't say we don't know what to do. We know what to do. The rules of Parliament are clear, and the mandate that we have as a committee, in my view, is clear. So I am saying, therefore, Chair, can we get a clarity as to why the situation is like this?
Thank you very much. Any other comment? All right. It doesn't look like there's some more hands on the line. I have this information for the DM for a follow-up meeting. One, that I think the point has been made that procurement unit are the breeding ground for irregular expenditure. And a lot of procurement activities sit in sit within the defense environment. and that each time when they have to conduct investigations, it's often, the same people who might actually be implicated, presiding over the BOI's Board of Inquiries. And you never get to the bottom of the problems. So the question is the independence of the investigations of the causes of irregular expenditure, fraud, and corruption independent in that instance? Obviously, the question is no, and they will never be independent. So I think it's a matter that needs to be reviewed. You see, the procurement is within the SecDef, and the SecDef is entirely responsible for that in terms of Section 38. So if you can come back to us and say, at some point, just to assure us that the BOIs that are instituted to investigate, to conduct investigations, are in fact, independent, and then can give us the results, we will be happy. If you can just come back on us on that one. And if you are also not quite satisfied that the outcomes of that process are what we want to see or ought to be, produced, what are you going to do about it? And then 2, the legal services not reporting on the litigation matters since December. If you can come back to us and say you have unlocked that, would be happy that from now they report to the Audit Committee. 3, information on the age of cases under investigation. They're actually estimating here that some investigation go on for 2 to 5 years on average. And that in some cases, they could go up to 10 years. And but they can't say it for sure that these are matters that have been investigated for a very long time, because they don't have that information. If we can have this information shared with them, the ages of all cases under investigations, including those matters that have been finalized, the investigation has been finalized and is awaiting the decision of the SecDef, the Chief of the Defense, or the head of a service or division, as the case may be. If you can come back to us on that, we will appreciate it at the end. And then 2, the filling of post in the internal audit unit. We need, when we meet again, progress on that. We've reported, it's been reported that due to capacity constraints, the internal audit has not been able to achieve all what they had set themselves out to achieve in fact in any year, or against their 3-year action plan or 1-year or annual action plan. So we want you to come back to us on that one. And of the filling of vacancies on the internal, on the Audit Committee, right now it's Mangugu and 2 others. There should be 6. I think please just move on that one and come back to report with us. And it's been reported, I think it's been repeated here by Mr. Dr. Basopu, that action plans are not implemented by unit managers. There's a delay in getting responses from the managers. It's not, I can tell you where I'm seated. I don't see how is that possible when the SecDef holds a monthly accountability monthly accountability management meeting with the heads of services and division. How is it possible that there could be delays in getting this information? I'm raising this point because it's actually the responsibility of the SecDef, who is the accounting officer, to ensure that the department has a system of internal, it's the responsibility of the SecDef to ensure that the department maintains effective and transparent systems of financial and risk management and internal controls. And I thought that the monthly management meeting are there for the SecDef to ensure that is able to fulfill the demands of a section 38 A1 of the PFMA that I've just read. And there's an issue of the systems not being electronized. We are still on manual. If you can come back, when are you going to move digital? Because now you have to go to all 73 centers, page through all the papers to get information, and in this day and age, that information can be acquired just at the press of a button and from wherever we are. That must take very long. It's long because it's manual. You have to drive to all the different centers. A training of the procurement officers and ensuring that they have the requisite skills and tools of trade. If you can come back to us, DM, and on what you are going to do. So I thought I should just, in summary, raise that those are the issues in the main that we want in order for us to move forward and come closer to getting a clean audit. Or just an unqualified audit. These are matters that don't require much resources and that within the competency of the people who are in office today to do. Those are the low-hanging fruits, as it were. I've said those things, and I'm sure if you can come back to us early January, so that our first meeting in the new year looks at that and takes stock of what we have discussed and the issues that we are taking away to deal with, and then chart the way forward. DM, over to you, sir.
Chairperson and honorable committee members, thank you very much for the exchanges that we had this morning of the oversight committee and our audit committees, both external and internal. Chair, all I can say is that the observations and concerns of committee members is noted, and the suggestions and requests around the way forward, what needs to be done. I've also noted them, and I also hope that the members of the Internal Audit Committee division, as led by the acting chief executive of audits, we will be able to follow them up and come back to the committee in January with an update. The lay of the land is, as you know, noted, not good at all. They are very, I think, glaring strategic weaknesses that we must address. And I'm happy that the External Audit Committee Chair, Mr. Luyanda Manuku, in spite of the committee not being full strength at the moment, the External Audit Committee, their report is very comprehensive, and it assists us a lot to understand what is it that we need to do. So, Chair, there isn't much. Let me not go into the issues. What we must undertake to do from the ministry is to take a retreat and go back and look at all this information. Look at all this information and make sure that the concerns, at least registered by the committee, we come back with answers around them in January. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, DM. Luanda, thank you very much. You are doing very well. Thank you very much for the time you have taken out. You have actually empowered us with the information you have. We knew that there was something amiss, but you have just drilled down into what you would consider as the root causes of what we are seeing. I think that point was covered by Mr. Maria, and in detail, and you've even mentioned the areas where you ought to be receiving the information from, so as to make a full appraisal, that which we are still waiting to have access to. The DM is going to unlock that. That information is necessary, that you must have it, so to complete the picture, that when you come before us, you present a complete picture. We're part of the ecosystem, and it is in our interest to see the department functioning in the manner that it ought to, functioning according to the law and complying with the dictates of our legislation and living up to the expectation of our people. So we'll leave it at that for now, and really thank you for the time. We can then, colleagues, then move to the next item. The next item, if my memory serves me well,
the next item, Chair, will be from our logistics environment, the one on fleet management, the rations, as well as the issues of fuel.
Oh, okay. No, thank you very much, sir. I'm sure you may want to preface this one. Let's have 30 minutes until 12 o'clock on the presentation, Secretary, on this item.
I think we'll do that, Chair. We'll do it for 30 minutes, but the areas that are going to be focused on in this particular presentation It is our policy on fleet management. It is also procurement issues in relation to 2 areas, and that is the ration packs, as well as the second area of procurement being the area of fuel. So all of these issues are covered in one comprehensive presentation, and I think that the 30 minutes will be sufficient for us to be able to deal with that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Secretary. Over to General Ndlovu from the Chief Logistics Office.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good afternoon, Deputy Minister and the members of the Portfolio Committee on Defense. As the Secretary has already alluded that we will cover all those rations fuel as well as fleet management policy, and in one presentation, as it was supposed to be different presentations. So you'll bear with us. Also in the presentation, we have included some of the tables that try to enhance the life cycle management of the fleet management itself, from the initiation up until the disposal itself. It may sound and look at a very technical level. We thought that we should include it because some of the outcomes may affect at the operational level as well as at the strategic level if we don't cover. As well as we have shown the procurement process within the ration itself to try and indicate the process that happens within the procurement of those rations. So now I will give it to Colonel Malaka, who's part of the Log Strategic Plan Office, and he will do the presentation. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. We don't see the presentation as yet.
We don't see it.
Is it visible now, Chair?
Not yet. It is visible now. Thank you. You may go ahead.
Yes, we can go on.
Thank you very much. I am Colonel Malaka. I've been given this opportunity to then brief the committee. Honorable Deputy Minister, Honorable Chair, and members of the committee, Secretary, and all protocols observed. I will then present this presentation. I will start immediately with the introduction. As part of our introduction, we quite used to say that soldiers march on their stomach. This particular saying has been coined back in the 18th century. It was true then, as it is also true today, that soldiers need food to be able to conduct their operations, their mandate. And in today's times, they also require vehicles, and those vehicles, they require fuel. So what we are saying is that those are the three essential commodities that the DoD require to make our military effective. And specifically those commodities, as they are utilized by all the services and divisions, they become universal and common, and therefore they are centralized within the logistic division as headed by Chief Logistics. As part of our aim, the aim of this presentation is to brief the Portfolio Committee on Defense and military veterans on DoD field management policy and the procurement of essential goods in the DoD. Moving forward, this is the scope that we are going to present, starting with the glossary, ending up with the questions. In the glossary, we are going to concentrate mostly on the terms that you will find in this presentation. Those abbreviations that will make easy for the members to be able to follow the presentation. This is the glossary. We say GMT stands for Government Motor Transport. This is in line with the Department of Transport abbreviation. And the CCGMT is the Coordinating Committee for Government Motor Transport, which is also one of the committees that are headed by the Department of Transport. DoD, which is the Department of Defense, AO, the Accounting Officer, or SecDef in this case. The MCC, Military Command Council, the FA will then mean a financial authority. GO, government order, in some instances, in other government department, they call it different purchase order. Then the TOR will stand for terms of reference, that will mean Chief Logistics. The SBs will then mean support bases. Those are the bases that are within the country of the defense force, those units that are in support of other military units within the military. CF also stands for Central Energy Fund. Then the DCPB is the Departmental Commercial Procurement Board. Moving into the first part of our presentation, which is the fleet management policy. In terms of our background, we say that we have about 3 categories of vehicles in the Department of Defense. We have our brown fleets, our brown fleet, which are mostly those military-specific vehicles like your tanks and so on. And then you'll find your yellow fleets, which are your agricultural type of vehicles that are in support of our operations. And then you'll find your white fleets that are mostly utilized as the administrative backbone of the defense force. They are used across all services and divisions, and they are also considered to be common and universal in the Department of Defense. And that is what it is managed by Chief Logistics. And the Chief Logistics then will be the one as a nodal point to develop the policy in this regard. Going in terms of the overview of our policy, we are saying that the broad government road transport policy guides us in terms of how we develop our policy. As we say that our government transport is guided by the legislative prescriptions as set out by the Public Finance Management Act, and as well as our operational guidelines are set in the GMT handbook, which is our government motto handbook, which was released or promulgated in 2019. And then in terms of our Department of Defense, we have our own policy in terms of log pamphlet, log 14 pamphlet 1, which then goes to the nuts and bolts in terms of how we manage transport in the Department of Defense. The transversal policy is developed and supported by the CCGMT, which the DoD is part of this. So we are part of this as headed by the Department of Transport, and we form part of that committee where we are also part of those entities that also influence our government motor transport policy. In terms of our DoD policy, we did indicate as well that this is a central function with the Chief Logistics. Will then draft the policy based on all the other prescripts and regulations, and then they will initiate it. Then this policy will be promulgated by the accounting officer, which is SecDev, and the current policy on fleet management. It is, of course, based on our government motor transport handbook and the other legislative requirements as I've indicated. The policy, it covers critical areas in terms of the life cycle management of our fleet, which starts from the initiation phase where we procure the vehicle and how we are supposed to utilize them, and then how we manage this vehicle as stock or as inventory, or how we manage them as assets within the duty, how we maintain this, and also how we phase them out or dispose them. This is just to indicate this slide, our life cycle management. I'm not going to go through deeply, but it's just to indicate the processes that are available within our policy in terms of how we indeed manage this particular commodity, which is vehicle or fleet. If you can look at this presentation, if you look on particularly on your left-hand side here, as I'm showing with the arrows or with the cursor of the mouse, on that side it indicates the entities that are responsible for a particular execution of this particular life cycle management. And there on top of this are the 5 phases of management, as I've indicated in the previous slide. Of course, if you look within the diagram itself, we have about 15 steps, which starts from the planning and budgeting, which is done by the service and division that require this, and right up to the disposal phase, where they then identify what needs to be disposed based on our policy to indicate whether the vehicle is beyond economic repair, whether this vehicle has reached its useful life in terms of our policy that we have. Because within our policy, we have as well indication in terms of when a particular vehicle, when it is bought, how long must it be within the system, and then how it must be disposed. I mean, in terms of how it needs to be disposed, looking at the kilos, looking at the age, and also looking at its economic maintenance of that particular vehicle. What is also important in this slide is that throughout this process, when this utilization requirement and maintenance phases are done, there is monitoring and evaluation that happens through our logistic inspectors that are also situated within the logistic division to ensure that this policy is fully implemented. In terms of our current status, is that the policy, as we have it, log 1 pamphlet 14, it is currently in review to ensure that it is also in line with the current developments that is happening within the fleet management industry as well as government. So it is a policy that is not much stagnant. It is moving. It is also being reviewed to ensure that we are always in line with what we are supposed to do. The purchasing of duty fleet, as I mentioned, it is centralized chief logistics, where we utilize the RT57, which is a transversal contract by the National Treasury, to purchase these particular vehicles. The challenges that we face in our fleet management is that the replacement of our vehicle is not done according to our policy, which stipulates the age, stipulates the kilometers. It also stipulates the economic usefulness of that particular vehicle. Because of the budget constraints that we have, we are not able to replace according to that, and therefore we find that most of our vehicles are staying within our system much more longer, and then they affect the maintenance, and the maintenance of that becomes higher because of the age, and also the serviceability or availability of those particular vehicle drops because of those issues of maintenance, because it becomes much more costly to maintain, and also the funding of that particular to maintain those vehicles is much more. Looking at, you'll find in cases where now you are supposed to repair a vehicle that on the book it is worth about 60,000, and then also the repair of that it's also worth about 50,000 or so, or even 60. So that becomes a bit of a challenge. But however, if you go to the market and you want to buy a similar type of vehicle, you'll find that it goes around 500,000, 400,000, and so on. So we end up now trying to fix these particular vehicles on a regular basis. What also we did as the SANDF, we went and looked at our equipment tables to indicate how best can we be able to effectively work with the current equipment table. And when we look at that, if we stick to the policy, we ensure that we dispose the vehicle when we are supposed to, and we also ensure that we go according to the equipment table. We saw that we will have a shortfall of about 11,729 vehicles that will be required. Going to the next part of our presentation that speaks about rations. I'll just give also a bit of a background in terms of this. In terms of rations, it's also a common commodity which is managed centrally. The rations are divided into two categories. We have our normal rations, mess rations, which we talk of rations that you will find in our houses normally, your bread, your things like that. And they also are divided into two, which is wet and dry. Dry are those that are processed, like your canned food, and then wet are those that are not processed, like your normal vegetables and so on. And then we have another category, which is patrol ration packs. This particular one, it is the one that is issued to soldiers when they go out to operation to be able to sustain themselves within a period of time, normally within 24 hours. Normally in other defense forces, they will call it meals ready to eat, because it is a pack that is able to be given to a soldier, does not need to cook it, or just be able to consume it during operation to ensure that the momentum of the operations carry on as it is required. Moving to the next slide, patrol ration packs are procured by means of a ration pack contract that we go through at the Department of Defense. In the absence of such a contract, we then process the requirement via our normal procurement policy. And then in urgent situations where there is an urgent need in order for us to be able to go for the operations, then we will request a deviation in that regard. I just need to mention as well that this is done in minimal, very, very minimal. We do not really want to go through this. We go for contracts, and then if the contract is not existing at that particular time, we go through the normal process. In terms of our mess rations, they are also decentralized, where all our procurement entities they are able to procure this particular rations, and also commercial relation method is also used, where messes and clubs within the Department of Defense, within their own funds, they procure and then claim from the state in terms of this. And also we have another method, which is the conventional way of procuring, which then is mostly utilized within the operational areas, especially at the borders, where then we use this conventional method in order to procure our rations. And also we just have to indicate that it's very few units that utilize this. This is also the process in terms of how we procure specifically mesh rations. It's the same as the previous table or a diagram. I'm not going to go through in depth. What I would like to explain in there is that we have a process that we have as the DOD, which goes from the first step until the 19th step, where different role players within the DOD then go through those phases in terms of acquiring these particular rations, and then making sure that the troops on the ground are able to receive them. What is also important is that the quality assurance in terms of what the soldiers receive at the end of the day is assured by ensuring that we send in inspectors that are able to go to the bases and ensure that this it is done, as well as also utilizing the local health inspectors that we get from the municipalities that also assist us in terms of ensuring that the suppliers that we contract are able to deliver and are also in line with our legislations in terms of health. In the next slide, we talk about how we then procure the ration packs, the end users being the services. Then they demand through logistic division in terms of what they require. Then logistic division will then consolidate those particular requirements and then confirm the specification. That specification for the ration packs is done by a multidisciplinary team, which includes dietitians from the South African Military Health Services, then our hospitality services as well. They go through, they confirm that in this particular pack, the soldier can be able to perform his duties and the dietary requirements are indeed packaged correctly in that particular ration pack so that the soldiers can be able to do that. In case where it's an initiation of a new contract, then the terms of references will then be sent to the DCPD, which is our Departmental Commercial Procurement Board. When they will then approve those terms of references, then they will send it to our procurement center, which is our CPSC and SPSC, where they will invite, and after inviting, then the suppliers will then give their bids, and then after that, then the DCPD will then award the contract, and the GOs and LOs will then be printed or be done via a Central Procurement Service Center. And the end users themselves, because it's only user pay principle, if the army, for example, they require this, then they will pay for that, and then that will then be delivered by the supplier, and it will be in the depot, where now the end users will then be banned from the depot. The approval of that demand will be done by long division, and then at the end of the day, it will be approved based on the plans in terms of what we have, in terms of operations that we're going to have, and then at the end of the day, it will be challenged by soldiers that will be fed throughout. The current status in terms of this particular commodities that we do not have a ration contract that exists at this stage, but however, I would like to mention that the terms of references are currently with the DCPB for finalization or consideration and finalization. The patrol ration packs, the terms of reference has already been approved for an 18-month contract. It has already went out to tender. We are at the stage where we are receiving bids, and we are expecting that this can be finalized in the next 90 days. In terms of the challenge that we face, is just one challenge that affects us all. The cost of living has risen, as you have seen, as we know also that the inflation is north of 7% at this stage, and also the funding that we get is more or less remaining constant, and that becomes a challenge for us to be able to feed our soldiers with the same budget that we receive. And the last one, we then talk of fuel. In terms of the background, we then went on the background to indicate where we come from in order for us to show where we are and why we made the decisions we have made currently. Looking at prior to the current procurement policies that we have coming out of the PFMA in 1999, there was what we call SNT depots, which are supply and transport depots within the DOD, which were responsible for procurement of fuel. In the case where a unit will have a requirement that exceeding 2,000 liters per month, a supplier will then be appointed for the unit by the state tender board as a sole supplier for that particular unit. What we're talking about, that supplier will be our OEMs. We talk about your normal sources, your engines, and so on. That we will then come into that unit, then they will install the necessary equipment for pumping that fuel and also delivering that fuel. And then they will own that particular equipment, and they remain the owner, and they will be responsible for the maintenance and repair of that equipment when it becomes unserviceable. At the implementation of the RT70, the ownership of that fell through the cracks because only one supplier was then allocated that will supply through those different units. And then as a result, because they will be delivering to them, they then have to take responsibility of that. Our current fuel sites, they are old, they are between 40 and 50 years old. And in accordance with the current legislations for listed activities, we are not supposed to be having tanks underground that is beyond 20 years, but at this stage, we are running to 40 and 50 years, so they are not complying at all. Prior to 2016, we were with the National Treasury contract, the RT70, where KZN Oils was appointed as the supplier to all state departments. During that period, that company concentrated more on the supply, and the maintenance part was highly neglected. And also, we then had various challenges with regards to the supply of fuel from that particular supplier. We were at some point also held ransom because of some minor administrative issues and so on that they did not deliver as it is what's required to the DOD at that stage. And then we opted out of that particular contract, and where the DOD then wrote to National Treasury and requested to opt out. And then we then had our own contract that there was a contract that was issued per province, where various suppliers, they were appointed for a period of 5 years that started from the 1st of November 2016 until October 2021. During that period, you will have minimum of 5 suppliers per province that will be supplying on a rotational basis to our unit and basis. Contract was only for the supply and no maintenance was in place then. And it was awarded based on that the petrol was delivered at the regulated retail price, and diesel was at the recommended retail price plus 15%. On expiry of that particular contract, we have been struggling as the DOD to ensure that our day-to-day in terms of requesting or requiring of this fuel becomes a bit of a challenge. We have not renewed it. We then went to price quotation at that stage. Because we had a memorandum of cooperation with the CEF at that stage, where we wanted to pursue it and see what can come out of there. But however, at this stage, with the price quotation, we became at the mercy of the suppliers, where those suppliers are between 4th and 5th within our value chain of supply, whereby they will charge us between R1.50 and R3 above the pump price, which is the retail price. These are the suppliers that we find on our CFD, our supplier database. In terms of our current status, as I've indicated, DOD and Central Energy Fund entered into a memorandum of cooperation to supply fuel and other related products. That was in June. Currently, we are busy with the service level agreement in order to operationalize or commercialize this FOC in order for us then to benefit from this. The NCC has approved the fuel mono in the DOD, which then includes that we need to have a strategic reserves in order for us to wait off any challenges that we might find as a military within the supply environment. The approval of the MCC with regards to this was based on 3 phases. Firstly, that we need to finalize the fuel contract of supply for maintenance and repair on the current fuel-based, home-based fuel equipment, and ensure that we are having a normal supply. The second one is the creation of a bulk storage and replacement of the old ones. Those that we talk about that are 50 or 40 and 50 years old, and then we become compliant, or we are in line with the current policies and legislation. And the third one is it's our phase 3, was to develop a capability, the capability model that will be able to cater for reserves, looking at the military that we need to be self-sustainable, and we're looking at having the military operational reserves that can be developed, and also having a strategic military reserve where we can tap into and be able to supply our forces when we require to do so. And the MCC approved this owing to the availability of funding that we saw that we have to split it into 3 different phases. Phase 1 being able to be funded now, the second phase and phase 3 that we do not have funds for, but that is what we aspire to have. Those are the advantage that we have utilizing this CEF. We really have an undisputed common interest in terms of what we need, because we are, for South Africans as the military, and we believe that parastatals such as CEF as well, they are for the country as well. So based on that, that is that common interest that we have. And we are looking at leveraging each other's expertise, looking at the expertise from the environment of CEF, that they have storage facilities that are available, that we can, as the DOD, be able to tap into that and be able to store and not even having to build new ones in some cases, then we are able to tap into that. And also looking at our expertise as well, because most of these storage facilities are also national key points, and then if we have our products in there, then we will be able to have home bodies that will be able now to assist in the protection of those facilities. And then also, as a DOD, we would like to cooperate as well, and this is an advantage because cooperate in the renewable energy, where now see if they have expertise in that. We would like to ensure that we also move into our renewable energy, where we are going to give energy to our units, and they are able to operate off-grid when we require to do so. And also the skills development and secondment of our members to be able to work within these strategic facilities and understand how the facility, the facility and also the fuel industry work. And then that will also assist in our HR rejuvenation as well as exit mechanism when we have to do so. And continuing collaboration in strategic stock storage for the DOD in the interest of South Africa. I think I've also mentioned that. The establishment and the protection of national military strategic reserves, as I've also indicated as well, and DOD purchasing cheaper fuel that creates savings. As you have seen in our presentation, that we are charged pump price about plus 2 to 3 rand, 150 to 3 rand. And then with regards to this, we are negotiating that we get not the debt, we get actually bulk prices instead of debt as well. This is the challenges that we are faced in this environment. The aging home-based fuel infrastructure that we have indicated, they are old. The infrastructure not complying to current legislation, and then funding for the upgrade of the infrastructure to cater for the operational reserve that we require. That ends my presentation. Then I'll hand over to General.
Thank you, Chairperson. Again, I think again it is important for me to emphasize on the certain issues. One, with regard to the fleet management, as we are quite aware that it is highly influenced by finances, and the budget constraint currently has a negative impact in the manner that we are managing this. And as a result, we are currently busy with the investigation in order to find the best model that will assist us in order to ensure a cost-effective architecture. We are also investigating to improve the mechanism, a mechanism that will assist us in monitoring the compliance with regard to the SAF policy on fleet management. We are striving to ensure that the fleet management currently is kept within the expectancy or within the life expectancy. Which currently it is not necessarily the issue. With regard to rations, I would like to mention that we are also striving to be self-sustained. We are investigating to do our own packaging. And once we have finalized that, we'll start with the pilot project. And with regard to the fuel, I think there are certain challenges that needs also to be seriously considered with regard to the commercial contracts. One is the long turnaround time to deliver. The second one, it is non-deliverance, that is failure to deliver at all by the suppliers. And the impact that this is, it has a negative impact on our training, on our exercises, as well as on our operations. And that means we have to hold the exercises that we're doing up until we have the fuel, and that impact on the time wasted, that we have to spend more time. Spending more time, that means more days, more rations, and also finance. And on operation, that has a negative impact on our national security, which I don't think that we should compromise our national security. And currently with SAF, we are discussing the issue of price structure, especially for the maintenance and repair that was alluded by the presenter, which has not been happening for some time. And that can be happened at a very less cost. And that is very critical for us because it will be a benefit. I think it is also important to mention that this will guarantee us an execution as well as sustainment in our operations, as well as in our day-to-day activities. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, General. Your presentation covered 3 items: food, fuel, and fleet. And you say that you are short of 11,729 vehicles to operate in line with approved equipment tables. You tried to explain it, but I didn't quite get exactly what is it that you are trying to say. Is that for you to be to do your job optimally, you are short of these 11,729 vehicles? One, that's my first question. And then the second question relates to the troop packs that was bought as a stopgap measure for the borderline deployment. And it's also reaching its sell-by date period. What are the plans to replace? Number one, it was a stopgap measure, but for lack of for budgetary constraints, it ended up becoming semi-permanent or permanent provision, and even with that, it's reaching its expiry date. What are the plans of replacing that fleet, the troop packs along the border? And then thirdly, the servicing, repairs and servicing, is it wholly outsourced, privatized, or there is some part that some work that you do in-house with minimum, mechanics? And then those were the 3 questions from me. And let me just check if Mr. Mare is on the line with the hand. Mr. Mare, I recognize you, sir.
Chairperson, thank you very much. I don't know if you can hear me properly, but I'm
yes, I know you're
driving, so
I can hear you.
Yeah, you can hear me. Okay, I'll just stop here quickly. You have covered quite a number of points that is important to me. However, I just wanted to know from Lock Division, given that they basically admit, and it was reported that in some cases they ignore or don't follow PFMA. In what cases and circumstances, and maybe a couple of examples, do they not follow PFMA? And if that is the case, what do they use to support them to ignore the PFMA? And if that is wrong, how do they correct that? Because I mean, we get reports, and we have seen even today that there's some cases where they don't follow PFMA. So maybe that we just understand from Lock Division, maybe today's presentation, but in general, how do they justify not following PFMA requirements? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Thabo Motle. I did pass your apology.
Thanks, Chair. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are, sir.
All right, no, thank you very much, and good morning. Good afternoon, to everyone on the platform. I've got a few questions, Chairperson. The first one is in relation to their fleet management policy. The presentation does not necessarily speak to issues of challenges they face in terms of maintenance of their fleet or wide fleet that is out of warranty. Because most bases that we have visited, we have seen a lot of those vehicles turning into scrap. And when you try to find out, the response that you get is that they are not allowed, even if it's minor breakdown, they are not allowed to fix those vehicles. As a result, they end up being redundant. What is it that they are doing to improve their own policy to allow or build to some extent a capability to deal with those challenges? The second one is with in relation to rations. Mostly they don't have contracts for all those
rations, not rations.
Yeah, whatever they call them. They don't have a contract. How are they supporting
Russians?
How are they supporting their deployed forces if they don't have contract? Are they not? Is that not a security risk for them? Because I'm saying that, Chair, because some of the deployment that happened internally, if you recall, there was a challenge in that regard to say they were giving troops vouchers, meaning that troops were buying food for themselves, which is a risk for our soldiers. Why are they allowing a situation to be like that? Is it because they are unable to plan ahead and ensure that they've got reserves to support some of this emergency deployment that they have? And when it comes to, lastly, when it comes to fuel contract, the contract that ended last year, how many companies were part of that? And out of those, how many were youth-owned? How many were women-owned? How many were owned by veterans? I'm asking that, Chair, because we want to understand the impact of the relocation to SAF and how is it going to impact on those? And how is the department going to ensure that they drive empowerment of those categories that I'm speaking about while they've relegated that responsibility to SAF? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me just check if there's more hands. No, I don't see any hands. Just linked to my first question and the follow-up made by Thabo Motle on the vehicles, the 11,700 that you need. We go around the province and we see a graveyard of vehicles, and largely in Pretoria, a graveyard of vehicles, and also here in Pretoria there is a huge number, I'm told, of vehicles that new vehicles bought to be deployed, but they are standing idly and gathering dust. Now, how do you understand the shortage that you speak of against those that are there? All they need, all they require, it's minor service on one hand, and on the other, the new vehicles that are there gathering dust. How do we make of what we are saying against what the information we're getting or we're seeing on the ground? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. One, with regard to the maintenance of vehicles, with regard to outsourcing and insourcing. We have a fleet management plan that exactly stipulates how this must be managed. But I will say that most of our vehicles, that is the commercial vehicles, normally when we procure them, we procure them with a maintenance plan for a period of years, let's say 4 years. And after that 4 years, then we determine if we are to continue to extend that maintenance plan, or are we going to continue to maintain them internally, that is in-source. And most of the time, after that contract expired, then the technical maintenance environment, they do their own evaluation, and they have a database of our own technical people. So then they will determine their capacity, that these types of vehicles will then be maintained internally by our own members. However, there are certain vehicles, specialized vehicles, normally are utilized by the VIPs. Those vehicles, we will then continue to maintain them, that is outsourced by where we bought them. And I must say that we have a very limited number of technical maintenance people who are trained to do the maintenance on those vehicles. So the quite a number of them will be still will extend the maintenance plan outside. With regard to the PFMA, with regard to the PFMA, I must.
Sorry, Shalembe, please mute your mic. Thanks. You may go ahead. My apologies. Sorry, go ahead.
The second one is with regard to how do we follow the PFMA? Yes. One, I must say that we have the PFMA, we have also treasury regulations. We have a DOD instruction with regard to the procurement, and there's a lock instruction also for procurement, which are normally distributed to the members who are working within the procurement units itself. Now, within the procurement units, we have different, different committees that technical evaluation committees that deals with this according to the PFMA. And also, there's a certain process that must be followed, such as the terms of reference that will address, including one of the questions that was asked, what are we doing with regard to the women and youth? If I may also include that question here, because that will be addressed within the terms of reference in terms of who are to be included in that particular bits. Now, once it is done, then those technical committees that are there, they will go through the bid processes or procurement processes using those terms of reference, as well as the mandatory, which addresses the treasury regulations as well as the PFMA. If with regard to the maintenance of fleet, I think I've addressed this, that our own technical maintenance people, they are able to do the first line repairs as well as the second line repairs in terms of the maintenance of vehicles. That is internal. Except those vehicles, then they must be maintained by the industries. With regard to the rations, what is it that we're doing in the absence of contracts? I think we have explained through the process out of contract, but the intervention here is that we have requested the delegation of 1 million, that will be utilized through the planned ration requirements by the end users. Number 2, there is also a commercialization that is also used by the services and division to ensure that they support with that to rations the units. And the last one is that if there are agent requirements that were unforeseen, for instance, like it happened with the unrest in KZN, and we do not have the quality of rations, then we will request a deviation for that agent requirement. With regard to the vehicles, sir, that probably you have referred to, most of them that seems to be unserviceable and parked in the transport park. Some of the factors that impacted on that was that disposal issue. There was a period where we did not do the disposal, and as a result, it resulted with some of those vehicles that were already investigated and declared to be BER for the disposal to be parked. And however, now the disposal process has continued, and already the bids have been given for some of the auctions. So the issue has been addressed, and we have received guidance from the Chief Executive in terms of continuing with the disposal. So I can assure you that there is no challenge with regard to the disposal.
That's the question.
The new vehicles?
I'm not quite sure of the new vehicles that currently are parked and unused, except those vehicles that either the chief rapid deployment usage, which are kept for certain part of operations that they can be used to. So those will be the reserves of the chief of the services, like chief of the army or chief of the Air Force.
All right. Thank you so much. All right, colleagues, let me thank the general for the presentation. Look, I'm happy that you are saying your new contract or agreement with the CF will guarantee an uninterrupted supply of fuel. because you've indicated the impact the delay in the supply has on training and etc. And the cost arising out of that. So we will be watching the space, see that all the issues that even Mutle spoke about when you do some procurement are incorporated in the process as part of empowerment. Colleagues, I would really want to leave it at that for now and thank the team for the presentation. I don't think that there is any much issue to be followed up at this point, except that we will call on you at some point just to get the progress report on the new contracts, on rations, on fuel, how it's moving, and the challenge to also receive more information or latest on the challenges in connection with the fleet supply. With that, colleagues, let's leave it on. Yes, sir.
If I may just make a suggestion, in terms of the responses now, it seems like there is no exceptions for not following PFMA and National Treasury regulations, that we have to maybe then follow from our side a zero tolerance approach in the future, that they must comply with PFMA requirements and National Treasury regulations requirements. So that's maybe something for us to note, so that we can just follow that up in the future as well. Thank you.
Maybe the SecDef may just want to comment on that, because it's a matter you have raised and it's been responded, and you think we still need to inquire further into it. SecDef?
Chairperson, I am not so sure whether the question that is asked by Honorable Marek is a broad question or is it specifically to this? Because I think in response to that, what Major General Ndlovu was saying is that we have various structures that we go through to do our own procurement, whether it is the fuel, whether it is the rations, and whether it is for the fleet that we buy. Now, we do adhere to the PFMA requirements. We also have our own departmental policies, and then also there are some functions that have been devolved from National Treasury through the Supply Chain Management Regulatory Bulletin number 3 of 2022, where they stipulate to say that some of the functions, such as deviations, where there is emergencies, they are devolving that to heads of departments and accounting officers. So in the issue, for instance, of the rations, if there are instances where we have to deploy and we don't have sufficient rations, like it was explained, normally we'll go through our central procurement system, and then from there it will go to the procurement central board, and then it comes to me as the accounting officer with a recommendation from the board to approve. In the instance that we have an emergency, we follow then a process where it will not go through the DCPB, but then it will be brought to the accounting officer. And within my office, then we make sure that all the things that needed to be done, they are done. Because then in situations like this, you see that those things come and then you need to do them at a short notice. So I think that's what it is. What wasn't there, I think, which is what the presentation covered, is that the contract had lapsed, and those were the processes that we are following. And I think it was also stipulated that we are at the tail end really of issuing that. So I don't think that we do not follow the processes. One of the things that one has to say is that we are also on a constant basis trying to make sure that those things are really followed. And where there are instances they are not followed, I have actually sent a few of them back because I would refuse to sign for things that did not follow the process. So thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Marais, you've had the secretaries clarifying the point. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, so I'm happy with her response because what she has confirmed is that because we know that even those deviations are in terms of national treasury regulations. So that's why I'm saying that as long as they comply with, it seems like there's no exceptions for not following PFMA and national treasury regulations. So we just have to flag that from ourselves in the future to also always check on that. Okay. Because we know that the Auditor General has reported, and we've even seen in the previous presentations of cases where, those requirements and regulations was or were ignored. So we just have to have a zero tolerance on that, because what the sector has said are those exceptions that are covered by national treasury regulations. Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you very much. Colleagues, I think we've dealt with this. Now, Deputy Minister, your parting note, because I think we are done with the departmental inputs, which then move into our own committee report. I want to make a comment. DM.
Chairperson, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. What I can just underline from the two reports in relation to challenges around the fleet management and the procurement of essential goods is to say to honorable members that these challenges are an amplification, in my view, of the concerns raised in the audits of the DOD as we discussed them in the earlier part of today's meeting. The External Audit Committee makes the point that there is a heightened unmitigated risk that the Department of Defense is confronted with due to largely insufficient funding. The details of that technical observation are actually to be found in this kind of detailed reports of activities in the different areas of the organization. Because, for instance, this report on fleet management, which we've just received here, it says that we have a shortage of 11,000 plus vehicles within the wide fleet of the department. That tells you that these are issues that are putting the defense and the security of the country at risk, because if an organization such as this department has a shortage of that amount of vehicles in terms of capacity, you can see that we will soon not be able, as the organization, to deliver on our mandate. it is true that, and this is not, it's not just figures, it is true, the lay of the land out there, it's so, striking in that you'd go to a base, especially with the reserve forces centers, where you find, a vehicle that was bought in 1983, a Toyota vehicle parked there, 1983. According to the, asset register, it is considered to be an asset that should be actually serviceable. And many of these, vehicles, every base has them lying there. And the process of disposing them also, it's something which the commanding officers are not able to give you a very clear answer to. And what is evident is that something is not working optimally or can be improved. But we are also in a situation where the policy review board of the department, as you would have heard for yourself, we're only able to convene it about 2 years ago. I would imagine that these are some of the challenges around which policies must on an ongoing basis, adjusted so that the department or the organization's functions optimally. And the audits, again, if I may just make the point, raise this question about the 73 procurement centers. These 73 procurement centers talks to these very activities that we are talking about, procurement of essential services at different levels, right down to the, the unit base. And the observation was that there are things that are just not right in those procurement units. The members that are staffing the structures that are involved in this supply chain, they are not trained in supply chain always where it is expected that they should have been capacitated. But you also have the supply chain operating without bid committees, as it is, reported according to the audits. There is improper delegation. There is poor segregation of duties, separation of duties, just to make sure that there's propriety in the way that environment, drifts. So what I'm saying is these reports around the problems of our fleet management, we can't even adhere to policy. The policy that is there, I would imagine, says a vehicle of this nature has to be utilized until it has exhausted so much mileage, and after that this is what should happen to it. But if you have vehicles that are more than 30 years, 40 years expected to be functioning in our bases, then policy is not relevant. So these are the issues which we must address, and I think they belong. They are just a detail of the earlier challenges that the members were strategically reflecting on, and they will invariably be part of the report that we come back with in January, Chair, in my view. That's what I can say. I submit. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, DM. I think you have ended the discussion on the right note, that we must still come back to these matters because they are all intertwined, and that in the end they affect operational efficiency of the various units within the department. But I think with us now focusing into these matters, my hope is that we will at some point be able to rise to the occasion. With that, let me thank you, DM, thank you, SecDef, and then say you are really free to exit the platform, and at any time you wish to, we can now move forward to the next item. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, the next item.
Thank you, Chair and committee members.
Thank you very much, DM. I now invite Willem and Peter to run through the next item.
Thank you, Chair. I think the next item is to go through the BRRs, the draft BRRs. I'll just share my screen. We will start with the draft BRR of the Department of Defense. And after that, we will move to the Department of Military Veterans. That will be followed by the two defense entities, which is Arms Corps and the Castle Control Board. Chair and members, the reports were distributed to the committee on Sunday evening, or the completed draft reports. So in the interest of time, I'll really try and go through the first parts very, very quickly, as it's only background and analysis, and then we'll get to the gist of matters, which is the observations and proposed recommendations by the committee. So starting with the DoD, in terms of the draft BRRR, we just looked at the description, functions, and mandate of the committee, and then for the purposes of all 4 BRRs that will be presented today, we included a section just explaining what the BRRR is all about. And as you can see, section 5.3 of the Money Bills Procedures and Related Matters Amendment Act contains the following in relation to the BRRs, saying that it is an assessment of the department's service delivery and performance given available resources, and assessments of effectiveness and efficiency of department's use and forward allocation of available resources, and lastly, to contain recommendations on the forward use of resources. So the BRRR, as always, is backwards looking and it is forward looking in terms of the recommendations that the committee makes. Moving on, we looked at the overview of the key relevant policy focused areas for the Department of Defense. Here we briefly looked at what the State of the Nation address had to say around defense. We also looked at the National Development Plan 2030 and also the medium-term strategic framework to see where the Department of Defense functions fit within that. We also looked at the previous BRRR recommendations from the committee, perhaps to highlight here the recommendation that related to a ring-fenced allocation for the midlife upgrades of Navy vessels. I'm highlighting this because it is again proposed that this be included as a recommendation since it was not previously implemented by National Treasury due to funding constraints. Looking back then on the DoD's performance, we look at an overview and assessment of the financial performance of the department for the past for 2021-22. And here we just looked at all the different programs, administration, their financial performance, and their actual performance against set targets. Same for force employment, land for defense, maritime defense, military health support, defense intelligence, and lastly, the general support program. We then moved on to the human resources matters. Specifically here, we looked again at personnel spending, which is a major area of irregular expenditure due to the ceiling imposed on the department. And the committee has dealt with this extensively. So we did include performance in this regard, and members will see that 69.14% of the department's total expenditure for the year under consideration was for expenditure on compensation of employees. We also included the view of the Auditor Generals. We looked at the Auditor General. We looked at irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and the basis for the qualified audit opinion that the Auditor General of South Africa gave to the Department of Defense. This brings us then, Chair and members, to the observations from the engagement of the 12th of October, where members engaged the Department of Defense on their annual report. I will read through these and then we'll get to the recommendations after this. Firstly, the committee expressed concern around the lack of cooperation by the DoD with the Auditor General in its auditing of Project Tusano and the value for money that this project offers. The DoD acknowledged that it provided the relevant information to the AG at the later stage, and the department takes responsibility for this lapse in cooperation. The DoD also noted that the reconsideration of current contracts related to Project Tusano is underway. The second observation, the committee expressed its frustration at the DoD for not correctly utilizing the 225 million rand allocated by National Treasury for the purpose of acquiring border safeguarding technology. Members noted that this allocation from National Treasury was based on a recommendation by the committee and that it was unacceptable for the funds to be used for other purposes when the estimates of national expenditure explicitly stated the purpose of the allocation. The DoD indicated that it utilized 65 million rand of the funds in 2021-22 in the fight against COVID-19. My apologies, that should be 2020-21. And in the following year, 2021-22, 75 million rand was used for the improvement of facilities on the borderline areas. The DoD then indicated that the outstanding or remaining 85 million rand is being used to acquire technology systems in the current financial year, 2022-23. Members again highlighted that additional funds were allocated to the DoD for the fight against COVID-19, and the shifting of funds was therefore unnecessary. Third, members highlighted their concern with the DoD for not achieving its targets for sea hours and the SA Navy, for the SA Navy and flying hours for the SA Air Force. Members further expressed concern around value for money in this regard, as Program 4 and Program 5 spent 100% of their budgets but missed their set targets. The DoD explained that aircraft and vessel availability contributed to this to a large extent. Fourth, based on observations on the non-achievement of sea hours of the SA Navy, the committee again recognized the need for the midlife upgrades of the SA Navy frigates and submarines. Fifth, members welcomed the fact that projects Biro and Hotel are on track and remain fully funded, as these acquisitions will greatly assist the SA Navy to increase its petroleum capacity and improve its hydrographic services. The committee next also questioned the DoD on whether there were any plans to upgrade their strategic airlift fleet of the SA Air Force, specifically the upgrading of the C-150 fleet. Members expressed the need for this to be addressed in the context of current SANF deployments and specifically external deployments. The committee members then also noted the need for improved facilities management in the DoD. Examples noted include the SA Air Force headquarters, where maintenance of air conditioning systems has been problematic, and as well as the non-renewal of contracts for their environmentally controlled SA Army warehouses. The committee then also questioned the progress made by the DoD in terms of the implementation of the 2015 Defence Review and whether a new review should be considered. In response, the DoD noted that milestone 1 of the review aimed at arresting the decline and that this has not been achieved. The department further noted that there are work sessions in progress to determine new levels of defence ambition. Once these are finalised, it will be taken to Cabinet for consideration, as it has to be weighed against the Cabinet-approved 2015 Defence Review. Members also questioned the DoD on their view of Project Hoefyster, notably the funding for the remainder of Phase 1 of the project. The DoD noted that the financial realities changed and that Armscor has been tasked to do its own due diligence. Partners in the local defence industry will be required to ensure a successful move into Phase 2 of the project. And then lastly, in terms of the observations, given the various findings of the Auditor General, the committee expressed the need for improved capacity in the Internal Audit Division and for appropriate steps to be taken to ensure the implementation of the DoD's Audit Action Plan. And I think this observation, this last one, is clearly in line with what the committee heard today from the Internal Audit Division. So, Chair and members, taking these observations by members during the engagement 2 weeks ago, we can extract a number of proposed recommendations from this. And we put this forward to the committee for discussion and consideration, but this is some recommendations that we could extract from the observations of the committee. And because the BRRR is forward-looking then, on the future use of resources, there's a number of recommendations that can be considered specifically to the Minister of Finance to see how Treasury can assist the department in line with what the committee has looked at in the past. Firstly, around the matter of borderline technology, the committee expressed its disappointment with the DoD not correctly spending the allocation of 225 million over the MTF on border safeguarding technology. The committee recommends that the DoD reprioritizes 140 million rand from its allocation for 2023-24, that's next year, for the purpose of border safeguarding technologies as force multipliers. Subject to this reprioritization being carried out and spent successfully, the committee then recommends further ring-fenced allocations for border safeguarding technology by National Treasury for the outer years of the 2023 MTF. And members may recall in the WhatsApp group this morning, we did send out a short note on this recommendation and what the thinking is behind this recommendation. Secondly, to the Minister of Finance, as in the committee's BRRR recommendations to National Treasury in 2019, 2020, and 2021, the committee again recommends the ring-fence allocation for the midlife upgrades of the SA Navy frigates and submarines. The committee is suggesting a staggered approach in this regard to limit the fiscal impact, but one that would ensure the midlife upgrades of all frigates and submarines over, for example, the next 7 to 10 years, starting next year. This will allow the SA Navy to appropriately plan vessel availability, adjust its sea hour targets, and accordingly and report more accurately to Parliament. It would also add significant capacity in terms of maritime security, which is currently characterized by very limited naval patrols. So that is in response to previous BRRRs, but also in response to members' observation around limited sea hours and limited patrols by the SA Navy. This is perhaps a long-term suggestion to the Minister of Finance. Third, the committee is concerned about the ability of the SA Air Force to effectively provide logistical and reinforcement support to SANDF members deployed outside South Africa due to a limited strategic airlift capability or capacity. The committee therefore recommends an urgent ring-fenced allocation to address the strategic airlift shortage of the SA Air Force. Fourth, regarding Project Hoefyster, the committee is concerned about the stagnation and lack of investment in the SANDF's landward defense capability, notably the SA Army's infantry capability. This factor has been worsened by the non-finalization of Project Hoefyster. The committee therefore recommends engagement between Treasury, the DoD, and Arms Corps to consider the further funding of Phase 2 of Project Hoefyster, or, importantly, should this not be feasible, that they should consider upgrading of the current Vartel fleet to extend its serviceability. In this way, members and chair, the committee can present two options to National Treasury to discuss this in conjunction with the DoD and Arms Corps. Further reporting requirements in this regard is that National Treasury, the DoD, and Arms Corps should jointly report back to the committee on the envisaged plan to address infantry capability constraints. These plans should be included in the DoD and Arms Corps annual performance plan for next year, and National Treasury should also consider a statement to this effect in next year's estimates of national expenditure. And lastly, chair members, to the Minister of Finance, this is not a recommendation, but perhaps a note based on previous engagements, as was also mentioned today. The committee wishes to note to National Treasury that the SANDF's mobility packages being used for border safeguarding have been in use since 2017 and may soon reach the end of their lifespan. Given the ongoing role of the SANDF in border safeguarding, the committee highlights the need for the DoD and National Treasury to jointly plan for upcoming expenses in this regard towards the end of 2023's MTF and beyond. The committee also wishes to reiterate that the current mobility packages were considered as an interim solution, and any future joint planning between the DoD and Treasury should consider a more permanent long-term solution that can effectively aid in ensuring better border safeguarding. So, Chair members, those were the very big recommendations in terms of the future resource use to National Treasury, but there's also opportunity for a number of recommendations to the Minister of Defence. Firstly, as noted in the recommendations to the Minister of Finance, the committee recommends that the DoD reprioritizes 140 million rands from its upcoming allocation for the purpose of border safeguarding technology. So this is just a repeat of the recommendation to the Minister of Finance. Second, the committee urges the Minister to prioritize consequence management in the DoD through instructions to both the Secretary for Defence and the Chief of the SADF. Furthermore, in this regard, the committee recommends that consequence management should be implemented on the most recent cases of irregular, unauthorized, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and then should work backwards to older cases. In this way, it will ensure that members are held accountable before leaving the department, and it will serve as a deterrent against future such cases. Next, to the Minister of Defence, with most aircraft maintenance programs now in place, the committee urges the SA Air Force to improve its achievement against planned flying hours going forward. The Minister is also encouraged to engage National Treasury and ensure that sufficient ring-fence funding is in place for the newly negotiated aircraft maintenance programs over the MTF. This is to ensure that the maintenance can continue going over the next 3 years. The DoD and DPWI should jointly, as a matter of urgency, address the air conditioning at the SA Air Force headquarters. It is further recommended that the environmentally controlled SA Army warehouses be reactivated. The next one, it is recommended that the Minister should address matters related to procurement processes in the DoD, with much of the procurement aspects currently located in the ambit of the SADF Chief of Logistics and not with the Chief Financial Officer. A workable long-term solution to ensure stability in procurement environment should be prioritized. And I think that relates strongly to today's meeting as well. Next, the DoD is encouraged to fully staff and prioritize its internal audit division to ensure that audit action plans are implemented. And this is an important factor for the committee to follow up on. And lastly, the DoD should ensure timely cooperation with the Office of the AG whenever audit requests are submitted. Chair members, based on those, we also split this into sections, making it easier to track where there's some reporting requirements to the department. Firstly, the Minister should report to the committee in writing on the outcome of the reconsideration of the current contracts related to Project Tusano by 1 February next year. Against the view that the AG currently considers the contracts under Project Tusano as irregular, the ministerial response should include the planned way forward with the project from 2023-24 onwards. Second reporting requirement, the department should submit quarterly progress reports on the implementation of its audit action plan. This should accompany the quarterly reports of the DoD to Parliament. Third, the DoD should provide biannual reports on the implementation of consequence management in relation to material irregularities, irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. The first such report should be submitted to the committee no later than 1 May next year. The reason for this date is that we have an upcoming meeting next week, I think, for this committee where we will look at this matter, and then we can schedule perhaps a proposed update on that in May 2023. The committee noted that environments in programs 3, 4, and 5 largely resulted in much needed spending on, again, number 4. The committee noted that environments in programs 3, 4, and 5 largely resulted in much reduced spending on contractors. The DoD should provide the committee with a written response on the planned contractor spending that were not realized in 2021-22, specifically as it relates to the maintenance of operational equipment. The information should be provided by the committee to 15 December 2022. Lastly, in the 2021-22 estimates of national expenditure, the DoD plan to transfer around about 1 billion to the special defense account. The DoD should provide information in writing to the committee on the actual transfers to the SDA for this year, as well as the total expenditure from the SDA for this year. The DoD should further indicate how much of the spending was 1, on capital acquisition, 2, on maintenance projects, and 3, how much of the planned SDA expenditure was shifted and used for compensation of employees, if any. The information should be provided by the committee to 15 December of this year. Chair members, I'll pause there and perhaps go up if there are any discussions. Chair, I'll hand back to you if there's any discussions on this now, or you want to go to the next one first.
No, let's do this. I also have to leave for, I'm in Cape Town, I also have to leave for Parliament. Let's make this the last report. And then tomorrow, we must split with the JSCD to allocate us at least 30 minutes to process the other two. Mr. Murray?
Chairperson, this is again a fantastic report, and I think it encapsulates most of our matters. There's one issue that I have missed myself, and I know it should, in my opinion, be part of our observation. And because this is a report to Parliament, it should include something about our observation to Auditor General of South Africa. And you remember, I think I supported you in that matter, where we're actually basically calling on Auditor General to say, don't just criticize, do your job as well. You remember where you said, so why don't you issue a certificate of debt? So the Auditor General must not pass on the buck from year to year, but they must also do something. They must not make their problem ours. In that sense, they must also do something. So I'm just wondering whether we shouldn't put that observation in as well, and a recommendation to Parliament that the Auditor General must use their legislative authorities and powers to also do something about this.
Are we not going to be accused of putting pressure on the Auditor General?
Well, we should put pressure on Auditor General because they clearly put pressure on us.
Maybe let's I hear you. Maybe let's negotiate this with them. In the meeting, it so happened that Tsotetso was there by accident, right? So they did not come to the meeting prepared to engage in that type of discussion. Maybe at the next meeting with them, let's put it as an item on the agenda so that it doesn't appear. Yes. Remember,
as long as we don't forget about this, because they have also an obligation, legislative obligations.
I'm happy with that. Let's make a note of it so that we place it on the agenda for a discussion formally with them. No, thank you very much.
Otherwise, I will recommend for our acceptance of this report.
All right, colleagues, there's a recommendation for acceptance. I don't see any more hands. Any more hands in support?
You will have to second this now. Seems to be, sir. It's only the two of us.
The colleagues are still there. They're still thinking. Can I get an indication for support, colleagues? It's been moved.
Supported, Chair.
It's supported. Thank you very much. Colleagues, do you support my? Let's deal with the. No, can't we defer the two items? Yes. This one and to the meeting tomorrow.
I support that.
We support that, colleagues. Then we agreed. No, thank you very much. It's due to time pressure. We all have to leave now. Thank you very much, Tim. Please, Peter and Willem, prepare for tomorrow. We will have to ask for a slot towards the end of the JSCD to convene as a committee to deal with the outstanding matters. On that note, thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, sir.